Now we're moving into what we call rationalize the denominator. What that means is make sure you have no radicals at the bottom, no square roots, no radicals at the bottom. Make sure your radicals, if you have any at the top, make sure they are simple, and make sure your fractions are simple as well. So let's start with part A. The radical at radical 7 at the bottom, we have to get rid of it. And the way I'm going to get rid of the radical sign is by multiplying top and bottom by that radical. In this case, radical 7. On the top, 3 times radical 7, I get 3 radical 7. At the bottom, radical 7 times radical 7, when I'm multiplying the same radical twice, I'm just going to get the number on the inside. So I have 3 radical 7 over 7. That's it. Looking at part B, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical 5. So I have 5 radical 10 over 5. The radical on the top is simple. However, 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I'm just going to have square root of 10. To begin with, on this one, let me simplify my radical at the bottom. I know radical 12, I can simplify that as radical 4, radical 3. So technically I have a negative 6 over 2 radical 3. 6 over 2, I can do better. So I have a negative 3 over radical 3. Wanted to simplify things as much as I could to begin with. I have a radical at the bottom. Let me multiply top and bottom by that radical. Radical 3 over radical 3. So on the top, I have negative 3 radical 3. At the bottom, I have 3. 3 divided by 3 cancels out. So I'm going to have a negative radical 3. My fraction is all negative, but I'm going to split my radical sign. I have radical 18 over radical 125. Radical 18, I can split that as radical 9, radical 2. Because radical 9 is the perfect square. Radical 125, I can split that as square root of 25 times square root of 5. Square root of 5. So my answer is a negative. Now on the top, square root of 9 is 3. So I have 3 radical 2. At the bottom, square root of 25 is 5. So I have 5 radical 5. Simplify things first. Now, I don't want a radical at the bottom, so let me multiply top and bottom by radical 5. So I have a negative 3 radical 10 over 25. Now, the 25, radical 5 times radical 5, it's 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Let me split this a little as radical 50 radical m to the 4th over radical p to the 5th. When I simplify my radicals, if I can, radical 50, I'm going to split that as square root of 25 times square root of 2. Square root of 25 is a perfect square. Square root of m to the 4th, m is an even number. M to the 4th, the power is an even number, so I don't have to worry about it. Now, p to the 5th at the bottom, I'm going to split that as the square root of p to the 4th, the square root of p. So I'm going to split my p to the 5th. Now, on the top, square root of 25, that's 5. Square root of m to the 4th, that's m squared. So on the top, I have 5m squared radical 2. At the bottom, p to the fourth, the square root of that is p to the second. So I have p to the second radical p. Remember, when doing letters, I'm always doing exponent divided by root. That's how I get the exponent on the outside. All right, so now I have that. To get rid of the radical at the bottom, let me multiply top and bottom by radical p. So on the top, I'm going to have 5m squared radical 2p. And I'm going to combine my radicals. Now at the bottom, I know radical p times radical p, that is going to become p. So p squared times p, I'm going to simplify this as p to the third. I have the cube root of 27 over the cube root of 16. I know the cube root of 27 is going to simplify to just a simple 3. Now the bottom, the cube root of 16 is not a perfect squared. However, I'm going to split that as the cube root of 8 times the cube root of 2. So I know I have a 3 on the top. That's simple. The cube root of 8 is 2. So technically I have 2 cube root of 2. Now I need to get rid of the radical from the bottom. For starters, people can come and say, well, let me multiply top and bottom by the cube root of 2. However, at the bottom, I will have the cube root of 4. That doesn't do it. All right. So instead of the cube root of 2, let me go the cube root of 4. I'm trying to make the bottom a cube root that cancels out the root sign, the radical sign. When I look at those, I see the cube root of 8 at the bottom. Right. This at the bottom is the cube root of 8, which is better known as 2. So on the top, I have 3 cube root of 4. At the bottom, I'm going to multiply what I have, 2 times 2. That's going to give me 4. Now, in rationalizing, if we happen to have a plus or minus at the bottom, I'm not just going to multiply both sides by radical 2 because I will not get rid of the radical. Looking at example A, I will, in this case, multiply top and bottom by 1 minus radical 2. Basically, the sign that I have to begin with, I'm going to write the opposite. So if I had a minus, I will write plus. Okay. Now, let me distribute the 3 on the top. So 3 times 1, I get 3, minus 3 times radical 2, I get 3 radical 2. That's what I have on top. At the bottom, I'm going to put these inside parentheses. Let me distribute the 1 from the first parentheses to the second parentheses. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times a negative radical 2 give me a negative radical 2. Now, let me distribute the radical 2 from the first parentheses to everything on the second parentheses. So radical 2 times 1 gives me a positive radical 2. Radical 2 times a negative radical 2. I know positive times a negative give me negative. Radical 2 times radical 2 give me just 2. Now, the reason why we switch the signs, positive and negative, because the two terms in the middle are going to cancel out. Negative radical 2 plus radical 2 cancels out. So I will finish on the top, 3 minus 3 radical 2. There's nothing I can do on that one. At the bottom, I have 1 minus 2, negative 1. Now we